When you loop through a simple array in Java, you typically use a for loop and a counter variable, or a for each loop. If you're using the counter variable approach, you increment that variable once each time through the loop, and then use that as an index value. You could do that with an array list, but the array list and the hash map both have more elegant approaches available for iterating or looping through their contents. There's a pattern called an iterator. An iterator is a special Java class that's designed to allow you to loop without having to keep track of internal numbering yourself. I'll show you how to use iterators on both the array list and the hash map. I'm working in a project called iterators, which is a part of this chapter's exercise files. The beginning code for this application declares an array list named list and a hash map named map. Items are added to each of the objects, and then the objects are output to the console. I'll run the application and show the results. Now, because these classes are not members of java.lang, at the top of the class, you'll see these import statements. These are critical. Now, I'll show you how to create an iterator from an array list. The first step is that you need to know what kind of class you're going to be getting. For an array list, the iterator is called a list iterator, and there's a special class for it. I'll declare a class named list iterator. Notice that there are two available. I'll choose the one from java.util. And when I declare the data type, just like the array list, I need to declare the data type of its values. In this case, it'll be string. I'll give this variable a name of list iterator with a lowercase initial character. Now, to populate its value, I'll call the array list object's list iterator method. This returns the iterator that references the list's values. I now have an object that I can use to easily loop through the values. Next, I'll use a while loop. I'll type in the keyword while and press Control space, and I'll choose this version, while loop with condition. It's up to me to determine what that condition is. The list iterator object has a method called hasNext. As long as there's an available next item in the collection, it'll return true. When I've dealt with the last item in the collection, it'll return false. So my condition will be list iterator dot hasNext. Within the code block for the while loop, I'll now create a string variable, and I'll give it a variable name of value. And in order to get the next item from the iterator, I use this code, list iterator dot next. When you call the next method, it moves internally to the next item within the iterator and the collection, and it returns a reference to the value. If it's a complex object, it's a reference to the object. Now I can output the value. I'll use system.out.println and just value. So that's how you use the list iterator when you're working with an array list object. I'll run the application and show that it's outputting in turn California, Oregon, and Washington. Because I started from an array list, which is an ordered collection, it's guaranteed that I'll be looping through in the order in which the items were placed into the list. So now I'll show you how to do something fairly similar with a hash map. Remember that this hash map has two sets of strings, the keys and the values. You can iterate through either, but I'm going to focus on iterating through the keys, because once you have a key, you can get to the value. With an array list, it's a single step to get to the iterator you need, but with a hash map, it's two steps. The first step is to get the collection of strings that you want to loop through, and the second step is to get the iterator. With the hash map class, you can either get the values using the method values, or you can get a set of values called a key set, and that would be the set of keys, California, Oregon, and Washington. When you get the keys, they'll end up in an object called a set. Type in the word set and press Control space, and choose the set class from java.util. And as with all classes in the collections framework, set the data type. I'll set it to string. Now to populate that set of values, call map.keyset. Now as I've been typing, I should have been getting import statements at the top of the code. If you aren't getting your import statements for any reason, you can easily fix that by pressing Control-Shift-O on Windows or Command-Shift-O on Mac. And Eclipse will fix up your imports, making sure you have the ones you need and putting them in the right order. Now let's go back to the code. I'm missing my variable name here, and I'll just call it keys. Okay, now I'm ready to create my iterator. When you're working with a set and you want to iterate through its values, instead of getting a list iterator, you'll get a class simply named iterator. At this point, you might be asking, how do I know this? And the answer is, it's in the documentation. Remember that because Java is so strongly typed, every bit of documentation will tell you exactly what you're getting. So I'm going to create a class which is data typed as an iterator. Again, make sure you choose the right version. This one should be from java.util. Set the data type and set the variable name. I'll call it iterator. And then get the value of the iterator from keys.iterator, the method. Now I'm ready to loop. I'll go to the next line and type while and press Control space. And once again, I'll choose while loop with condition. And the programming interfaces of the iterator and the list iterator are exactly the same. So I'll be able to use while iterator.hasNext. And within the while loop, I'll once again declare a string. I'll set its name to value. I'll get its value from iterator.next. Again, following exactly the same syntax that I did with the list iterator. And then I'll output the value, system.out.println. I'll run the application, and I get California, Oregon, and Washington. But remember, those key values came from a hash map. But remember, those strings are keys in a hash map, and each key has an associated value. So I'm going to do this with a little bit more complexity. I'll expand my editor so I have a little bit more width to work with, and I'll add before the value the capital of, and then the value. And then after that, I'll add another plus operator, and a space is, and then after another space and another quote, another plus operator, and then map.get value. So the whole purpose of this was to loop through the keys so that I could then address the keys and their associated values. Here's the result. The capital of California is Sacramento, and so on. Iterators always work on collections of single values. When you're working with a hash map, you're working with a collection of keys and associated values. So the first step is to extract the keys, and the next step is to get the iterator so you can loop through the contents. Iterators are a valuable part of what's known as the collections framework in Java. They're designed to make it very easy to loop through the contents of your data in memory without having to keep track of your own numeric counter variables or use your own handcrafted strategies.